So let me introduce who I'm with. Scott Evans, one of our deacons. He does logistics for Rarig, a company here in Wintersville. Linda Spencer is a retired principal from Hancock County Schools, and she's well known in the community. Just leave it at that. Pete Brogdon, one of our deacons, also works for the city of Weirton, and his wife, Alesia Brogdon, who is an employee at Kroger and Company. So all of these people are very active members here at Crossroads, and this is a difficult topic based on what's going on in the world. And in case no one noticed, all of you are black. You come to Crossroads. So the reason that I gathered this group together is twofold. Crossroads is a church that has, I was telling Linda, I counted 22 black regular attendees. That's 25 if you do preacher math. But then we have several other minority families too. So that's not a huge number by percentage, but it's enough that it's noticeable. And I think the problem that we have is that this issue isn't talked about. And I think it's not talked about for two reasons, both of which I'm hoping we can put a dent in with speaking out. The first is that I think there's people who are racist. And if that's true, I'm hoping that our conversation will convict them. I hope that my testimony and my involvement will be something that will be a conviction to them. But the other thing I think is that people just don't know what to think or don't know what to say, and they just need information. And they need to see how brothers and sisters in Christ, what you guys are dealing with that they might not really understand, they might not have experienced, and really hear from your heart, from brothers and sisters in Christ that we trust and we know, and we feel like we have things in common with, kind of what your experience is. And so I think, the way to start would be maybe for each of you just to, whether it's in the church or in the world, just share a little bit about kind of how this issue of racism has affected you.
A time more recently, just maybe 5 years ago, I was at a dry cleaner, wanted to get a suit dry cleaned, and the gentleman wouldn't wait on me. He just stared at me. And at first I thought maybe he's busy, maybe something's going. I tried to give everyone the benefit of the doubt, but I kind of had a hunch. Then many other customers walked in, 6 or 7 other customers, female, male, all white. They all got served. I never got served. And he said, "What is it going to take for you to leave? Don't you get it?" And I just said, "You have a good day, sir." And
See, that's something that I couldn't relate to. I mean, I just realistically, you tell the story, and I'm thinking how I would feel, but I've never. I mean, I've had people refuse me service because I've acted like an idiot, But I mean, that's it, and that was 5 years ago. I mean, that's since you've been in this church.
Yes.
And we tell people go out and witness and go out and then you go out and that happens.
So there was a lot, and even as far as I didn't get a counseling job, so I went into administration. So I went and got my administrative certificate, and I became a principal. First, they sent me to a little area that was outside of Weirton, where there were no minorities at all. And I was at the elementary school there, which I didn't, as an assistant principal, which I didn't mind at all, and worked very well with the community and with the students and whatever. And as a matter of fact, I liked being the assistant principal. And then the superintendent told me that he was going to move me to the middle school in that little town. And I was going to be the principal at the middle school. Well, I told him really that I didn't want to go, but he said I didn't have much of a choice, so that's where I was going. So I went to the middle school, which was really the year from hell for me. Most of the employees were male, so I was the administrator over white men, and they didn't like it. And they weren't going to be cooperative at all. And so I had people resign from being the coaches and resign from being this and that, and it was not good. And so I went to the superintendent and I told him I'm not going to be here another year. I said, I'll go back to the classroom, I'll do whatever is necessary, but I can't do that. And his words were, I understand. I'll have another job for you. So, which he did. He had another job, and I did take a principalship, somewhere else. But it was very, very interesting. But I noticed that the white men were very, very uncomfortable, and there was no way they would cooperate. And they let me know.
You think it was primarily because of your color, or was it a combination of female and black?
I think it was a combination.
I've had situations where my wife knows where I had applied for a job at a certain company, and I scored the highest on the test. But prior to that, my father-in-law or my mother-in-law got me an opportunity to get an application, and I walk in the room when I was told prior to that they weren't taking applications until my mother-in-law ran into the gentleman that was in charge. And I get the application, I go into the room, and it's full of all white males. I happened to take the exam, and my neighbor told me I scored the highest on it. And
So you were denied an application. You were lied to that they
Yes.
weren't taking applications, and then found out why because you happened to get one.
right, and then I scored the highest on the exam, and my neighbor tells me that, you're going to get this job, and find out that it was the boss's nephew that ends up getting the job, and he didn't score the highest.
I got a job only because my cousin had quit and got a job in the Wintersville. And they only, at the establishment I worked, they only kept one B downtown. That's it. They could hire 50 Caucasians, but they would never hire a black. They have one. So I went, I got the job. I was so happy. I came home, I told my parents, I got a job, my first job. I really got it. It was the job that was from hell. You did everything that they didn't want to do. They treated you nasty. I know my manager one time, he was going to fire me. I had a lady that went to the church. And I worked every Sunday, and at that time, we closed at 7 o'clock. Every Sunday I worked, and we closed at 7 o'clock, and church was right over here. I had a lady went to church, and she came in, and she looked at me, and she was very nasty, and she spit on me, and I said to her, didn't you just come from church? She said, yeah. I said, well, evidently you didn't learn nothing. You need to go back. Well, she told my manager. He came to me, and he told me I was there to do my job and shut my mouth, and he didn't care what anyone told me or said to me. I was to shut my mouth and do my job. Well, that did not rest very well with me at
No.
all.
Well, and here's why I think part of this conversation just starting is so important. That a lot of people, they try to sidestep racism issues by saying, well, that was 100 years ago. Well, guess what? Your story was 5 years ago, and I'm not going to tell anybody's ages, but I know you two are in your 50s, so you're not that old. That wasn't, this wasn't 5 generations ago. And so that's a, you're welcome, Pete. So that's a big deal. I mean, it's not, and even though that wasn't yesterday, 5 years ago, I mean, this is still going on.
Oh, it's still.
And it's important, I think, that that people who are white understand that it's still going on, even if they might, obviously people look in the mirror and say, well, I wouldn't talk to you that way, I wouldn't spin on you, but the fact that somebody still would means that if one person is discriminated against, we all suffer.